Hey everyone, it's Sabado. Welcome back to the Everyday Retiree. Before I get started, I just want to let everybody know that on November 22nd, 2025, at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will be having a live episode. And this will be an episode that's solely dedicated to answering questions from you, the audience, just about some of the questions you have, whether you're thinking about trying to get out of the rat race, if you're already out of the rat race, or if you're on the precipice of thinking about making that move. It's really going to be me sharing my experience with you in real time with questions that you can either submit to me ahead of time. You could put them in the community post. You could put them in the comments of a video. I'm going to take a list of comments that I've had in the past so that way I can see where the questions are there. Or I'll be taking questions in real time and I'll get to as many of those as we can. But as we've grown, I've been able to really understand that this is a very diverse community with people from all around the world with a bunch of different situations and a lot of things impacting their day-to-day life. And so what better way for us to connect than to have a real conversation? And this is not a substitute for the conversations with Sabado or the chats with Sabado. You can still send me an email and we could get on a Google Meet and talk. But this is just an opportunity for us to all learn from each other within the community. So, on that note, I'll continue on with the content, but I wanted to put in my own commercial. So, I got a comment the other day and it really hit home. And someone wrote to me and asked the question, Sabado, I see your videos about early retirement, but what's it really like? What are the parts that nobody talks about? And honestly, that's a great question because retirement, especially early retirement, isn't about just having enough money. It's about adjusting to a whole new rhythm of life. After more than 2 years of early retirement, I learned that there are definitely some ups and some downs in things that I expected and things that I didn't. So today, I'm going to share with you some unexpected truths about my retirement experience or my retirement life. And I'm going to talk about the good, talk about some of the hard stuff, and just keep it real with you. But let's start with the fun part. That's what I call the honeymoon phase. Those first few months, they felt amazing. I was waking up without an alarm clock. I was actually able to enjoy slow mornings. I took some walks. I had my cups of coffee without being rushed, and I didn't have to check any email. It was a beautiful thing, and I felt like for the first time in my life that I'd really broken free from the grind, and that was powerful. For me, I remember thinking to myself, I could finally exhale for once. But, and there's always a but, that feeling didn't last forever. Eventually, the high off of being off work, it started to fade a little bit. And there were other things that started to creep in just because I was so used to being productive. And I'll tell you, this is where I started to get caught off guard. It was the emotional side. I had spent decades being productive. I had spent decades being responsible. Ultimately, I had spent decades of being on. And then suddenly that identity was gone. And I didn't realize how much of my self worth was tied to work until it wasn't there anymore. I never saw myself as a person that overly identified with the work that I did, but when it was gone, I realized there was a gap. And even though I chose to retire early, I still had moments where I was asking myself, am I still contributing? Do I still matter? And that's the thing that nobody prepares you for. It's the emotional gap that comes with the freedom. I had the time, but I had to figure out who I was without the title. And it sounds easier than it really is because, again, I'm a person that's always lived with purpose. My mission statement since I was 22 years old was and continues to be to uplift the human condition in any way that I can. But the question I had to ask myself is when I was in a job, I was doing that every day, 60 hours a week. But now that I wasn't working, how was I going to do that? And what does that really mean? And am I really going to be able to hold true to who I've told myself and committed myself to being for the last number of years? Now, look, we all know about the financial costs, healthcare, inflation, taxes, but there are also hidden costs that are emotional and social. When I retired, my social circle, it really started to shrink really fast. I started to find that a lot of my relationships were built around work or what I did or people's perception of who I was based on the work that I did. And some of the people that I collaborated with and that I talked to, and when I wasn't in that world anymore, I started to realize that many of those relationships were built on convenience. And I've talked about that in other videos, how even in my personal life, there were blocks of time that I had available to do certain things. And so I would sacrifice what was important to me in terms of my relationships because this was a group of people that would fit into that time frame. So it was really about convenience and not closeness. And there was also the cost of structure. I went from having a full schedule to having nothing but time. And at first, it felt like freedom, but it quickly became drifting. And I almost felt like I didn't necessarily have a purpose. And I tried to fast forward that by doing some substitute teaching, but I realized substitute teaching is work because when you're dealing with kids at school, what you start to see is you start to see the dynamics of a person's home life manifesting in the behavior of the kid. And if I'm going to get into that type of analysis and understanding and thought process around kids and something that I'm choosing to do, then I might as well go back to work and make more money and have less aggravation. Before I left my job, I did all the financial planning. I ran the numbers, I created the budget, I reviewed my investments. But what I didn't plan for was the emotional closure. See, there's a difference between just the emotional impact and having the emotional closure. And I would recommend that if you're preparing to retire soon, or maybe if you're forced into a layoff, and I know we talk about that in other videos, or if you have a medical issue, give yourself the permission to process it. I never really felt like I gave myself or was given the permission to process my emotions because I always had people that were demanding things from me, whether it was my parents demanding excellence in everything that I did, whether it was society's expectation I worked twice as hard to get half as far, whatever it was, or just the demands of work. I didn't have the opportunity to say, well, let me sit back and think about this. And I think times have changed where people have started to understand the importance of mental health. But folks, I'm old school. You either got after it or somebody else got after it for you. And so I never was able to take that time. And so I implore you now to give yourself that permission and take your time to process it. And once I started to take that time to acknowledge what I was walking away from, I started to feel just a lot better about what I was doing. And you have to acknowledge and give yourself that time because even if your work environment is stressful or it's toxic or just generally unhealthy, it was still a big part of your identity, which means it's going to have a net impact on who you are as a person. So the other thing you want to realize is that the closure doesn't happen automatically. It takes space and it takes grace. And that process is essential to a healthy retirement as it is to your savings account. So don't just think that, well, the emotions are just fluffy stuff because you can have all the money in the world, but if you're emotionally unbalanced, guess what? You're screwed. But here's where it gets good again, the rebuilding phase. Once you start redefining what matters to you, retirement becomes about purpose, not just rest. For me, that purpose has shown up in unexpected ways. Speaking at conferences about financial literacy and the benefits of gardening for health, working with community groups and teaching people about growing their own food, having real one-on-one conversations with subscribers about retirement planning. Those things have given me more fulfillment than any paycheck ever did because now I get to use what I've learned and who I am and how to make a difference. So if you're thinking about retiring early or just dreaming about it, remember this. Retirement is not an escape, it's a transition, one that requires as much emotional planning as it does financial. You'll have incredible moments of peace and freedom, but you'll also have moments of questioning and growth. Both are normal. Both are part of designing a life on your terms. And like I always say, it's never my expectation that everyone retires early, but it is my expectation that you live your best life. So thanks for watching. And if this resonated, hit the like button and subscribe for more real conversations about money, mindset, and meaning in retirement. On that note, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.